Hi, this is Miss Litton, and this is my wonderful Period 1 class. Say hi. Hi. Nice. This is Chapter 44, Population Ecology. I want to talk to you a little bit about, just to have you skim through these notes. We're not going to finish them all today. I want to point out some things to you. So if you look at section 44.1 is the scope of ecology. Then we get into demographics. Then if you go to 44.3, it talks about population growth models. And then you see some equations. Do you see the equations in your group shared notes? Are you there? These are going to be important. You need to be able to work with these regardless of how far we get today. If you look at the and you don't need to go into those now, okay? But if you look over what I have in that box, it says this worksheet number 1 is an excellent explanation of how to understand the equations above. And the first 3 pages lay out a tremendous foundation, like walk you through step by step each part of the equation. And we'll be doing some practice ones in class too, but it's a good support. However, a couple of the answers are a little funky, even though it's a great worksheet, just a couple of them are a little bit hard at the very, very end. So I gave you some corrections right there on the document. And then if you look at the second paragraph, it says after you have worked through the first worksheet, here is the second set of practice problems. So there's practice problem set number 2. And then a separate document has the answers on how to solve all of those. And you know the best thing to do is to work it out without seeing any of the answers, solve it like you were taking the AP exam, then go and check after that. The first worksheet, the answers come at the end of the worksheet, so you'll see it there. Then we talk about regulation of population size, and we're going to talk about life history patterns, and then human population growth. And last night I put up another independent review, and it's part 2 of the labs. And you're going to see you might want to wait till this lecture's done to do that one. I don't think it's due till Friday, or you can do it ahead of time. You'll probably be fine. I gave you hints if it was too hard, some of the questions. But that relates to this chapter as well. There's a lab related to that. Okay, everybody good to go on their notes? Okay, so let's go back and review. It goes atom, then what? Atom, molecule, organelle. Look at me. Do it together. Atom, molecule, organelle, cell, tissue, organ, organ system, organism, population, community, ecosystem, biosphere. Okay, so this chapter is focusing on population ecology. So we're looking at one species living together as a population. When we go up from population, what is that? Community, and that is multiple species. And then when you go population, community, and then what? Ecosystem, that's looking at all multiple species and their what? Environment. Okay, so just making sure this is focusing on population ecology. So the first thing we want to review here is what ecology is. So youngest biobuddy, tell oldest biobuddy, what's the definition of ecology? Go ahead.
The study of interactions of organisms and the physical.
And you can throw that into your notes. All right, so we haven't taken it up to looking at ecosystems yet, but that's what we're building towards. So first we're going to just study populations in their environment, and to do that, we need to start with their habitat. And the habitat is where an organism lives. A habitat is where an organism lives. Now, we want to see that the environment, you remember we've already talked about how life started, right? Remember the evolution, right, of the chemical evolution of monomers, and then monomers built polymers, right? And we said, what kind of early Earth environment did we have? Reducing, right? And because it was a reducing environment, then that supported the building of molecules, not the breaking down, right? So the environment, there was heat, right, provided by an energy, which was what? Lightning, molten magma, right? So early Earth provided the conditions for life to arise. Then once life was arising, once you started getting cells, and you started getting multicellular organisms, when you had the evolution of the non-cyclic photophosphorylation, with me, what did non-cyclic photophosphorylation generate?
Oxygen.
Oxygen, good. So generated oxygen, right, because you split water, remember? Okay. So then once you had oxygen in the air, then the environment changed from a reducing environment to a oxidizing environment, which was really good to make multicellular organisms, right? Because large multicellular organisms require more oxygen. Okay. Also, it created a what kind of layer? Ozone layer. So the life itself changed the environment in which it lived, right? And as a result of that, that affected what life could exist and what was adaptive for that new life conditions, right? So what I want you to see here is the environment imposes selection pressures on organisms. So the environment was dictating who could survive. Then that life itself changes the environment, which then dictates what next organisms can survive. So if you live in an area that doesn't have any soil, okay, just rocks and maybe some lichen growing on it, over many, many years, the lichen and weathering due to the environment is going to break that rock down, and you're going to get a little bit of soil, so eventually you can have some plants, and those plants have what that go into the ground? Roots, which is going to break it up even more, right? And they're going to change the conditions of that environment so that there's even more soil. You're going to have bacteria. You're going to have fungus that start to grow and start to make more soil. So now the conditions have changed so other life can be there. And that life then in turn affects that environment, and back and forth. They each are creating selection pressures on each other. There's a feedback between those abiotic environment and the life that lives within it. So oldest biobuddy, explain this slide right here. Go ahead. Based on what I just talked to you about. Go. In your own words. Okay, now this we know. So we'll just ping pong back and forth. So here's our individual, and then Slate, this is you. Go ahead, I think. Go ahead, Slate. Population. And then Blue, go ahead, community. Switch. And then finish out your ecological levels in your notes too. What? No, you can. I just didn't. Biomes are like specific areas with specific climate and flora and fauna. So that's a specific area of the biosphere. All right. So what can we do with that? When you look at modern ecology, it wants to be descriptive, saying what is it, describing those things, but also predictive, using models to go, okay, what could happen? What happens if we remove this species? What are the influence? What are the factors? What's the fallout? So if you're looking for a job in this area, here are some different things you could do. Could you each pick one and share it with your bio buddy? What would you be interested in there if you had to pick something in ecology? Go ahead. All right, so next, I don't know what this question is. Like I said, I lost my notebooking over the weekend, so we'll see what this question is. Let's go. One question. Oh, yeah, I couldn't check it. Is it, what is it?
Oh my God.
Oh.
Jeremy was the astronaut. No, I wrote 12.
Yeah, then all you had to do was type in the number 12. That was the answer. I just wanted you to review that and then type in the answer 12. Some of you struggled with that. Biosphere. All right. So let's look at the demographics of a population. So you have a term up there, demography, and I would like the slate. Go ahead, define it. I gave it to you. Go ahead. All right, so the first thing, oh, and this did not fix. Interesting. This was fixed. I did that. So let's look at density, population density, number of organisms per unit area. So if we look at this habitat of a pond, you can see this would be normal numbers, let's say for black bass, is 15,000 per that 1 hectare, and then this 148,000 minnows, but 275 turtles. So you're looking at the number of individuals per that area. That's going to come up later when you start to do your population ecology questions. Is going to talk about density. So do you think this particular pond could support as many turtles as it would minnows? Why do you think that is? Why can't it support 148,000 turtles? Turtles are bigger, minnows are smaller, okay? And we're going to talk about ecological pyramids and about that at the bottom of the pyramid you usually have your producers, right? What are producers? Plants. Then who eats the plants? Herbivores, right? Herbivores, and those are consumers. They're going to eat those plants. So you would think usually, though it's not always true, you would have more producers than you do what? Consumers or herbivores. Now, an exception to that, you can always invert these ecological pyramids. You could have one tree that's supporting 200,000 insects, right? But then you could look at mass, and there's more mass of that tree than 200,000 insects, yes? Okay, you can also look at it another way. Sometimes you can have producers that are so good at producing, they can actually support a larger number, even a larger mass, because they're constantly doing photosynthesis and generating those sugars. So where you can't, what you can't invert, the best one uses the pyramid of energy, because there has to be more energy on the bottom level before you go to your next level, right, as you're moving on up. So you're going to see that population density, usually it's going to tap out. You're going to reach, what is that called? Do you know what that is? Starts with a C. Yes, carrying capacity. Good job. So you're going to reach that carrying capacity. So population density is very important. And and actually, let's just go to that right now. Population density is the number of individuals per unit area. Number of individuals per unit area. Okay, the next thing you are going to look at is distribution patterns. So we'll go through each of those. The most common, I'm going to tell you right now, distribution pattern is clumped. And that's where your environment has variations in it, and everybody wants the best spot, and they're all clumping around those resources. And then the third one is rate of growth. How fast are you reproducing? Is it exponential growth, like let's eat and drink today for tomorrow we may die? Are you just going for it? Or are you looking down the long road and investing in young or offspring carefully in that process? So we'll talk about that. There are, as far as your resources, Slate, you take this, and then Blue will take the next one. Go ahead. Okay, and then Blue, there are limiting factors. Okay, for instance, I only had 2 kids. Why do you think I stopped at 2 kids and didn't have 10 kids? Though some people do, yeah.
Financial reasons.
Financial reasons. Okay? How am I going to support that? I didn't want to have to drive a bus to a restaurant to transport my kids. Okay? Diapers are like strapping dollar bills to their butt. Financially. Also emotionally. Right? I don't know that I could emotionally invest in having 10 kids, though some people can. But, so that would be, there were limiting resources that impacted how many offspring I would have. Same for there could be abiotic and biotic conditions that inhibit those numbers. So some examples of abiotic factors and biotic. Why doesn't slate, you take the one on the left, and blue, you take the one on the right, the biotic. Go ahead. Do you remember, and we will review it obviously in this chapter, but do you remember your different cycles, like the water cycle and the carbon cycle, nitrogen and phosphorus cycles? Do you remember those? Did you learn about those in middle school? Lab now. Okay, there we go. So if you look right here, inorganic nutrients like nitrogen and phosphorus really tend to be limiting factors. There's not enough of it in the environment. It usually keeps the numbers back. And we'll talk about that. And then we'll go through some of these other, but you remember symbiosis. What were the 3 relationships that we talked about? 3 main ones. Mutualism, parasitism, and commensalism. Good. All right. And predation, those are going to keep numbers in check too. And so we'll go through each of those. And then, did you know this? Yeah, you have 3 chapters of content left. And we will touch, I think, that 3rd chapter by the end of the week. So I just want to remind you, it's time to start reviewing, okay? If you haven't already started. So on your notes, you have everything for resources. Go to limiting factors, environmental aspects that determine where an organism can live. Okay, and let's talk about distribution patterns. And I have more here in the notes than you actually need to, more here on the presentation than you're going to have to actually write down. There are 3 main types: uniform, clumped, and random. Which one do you think shows high competition? Probably regular, as I would look at. There's some serious competition, right? Because they're all spread out evenly. And then random would be an example of probably low competition, and they don't care where they are. These are the 2 extremes right here. This is probably most common, is clumped around resources, and it can change over an organism's lifetime. Maybe younger, it might be clumped, and then it'll change. I'll give you some examples of that. But here is one. This is looking at bison in Yellowstone. And they're in clumped groups called herds, obviously. And what would be the advantage of being clumped? You're clumped around resources, but maybe you can confuse predators and you have a safety. This is the most common, clumped, because you usually have an environment that has some places that are better than other places. This would be random, and this is giving you an example of deer. And so they have a uniform environment with low competition. And so it doesn't matter if they're here or there. They just kind of move throughout that resource, in that environment. And then uniform, this also is another extreme. You have real high competition in a uniform environment. I don't have a picture of it here, but I wish I did. Maybe you can find it. But it was fish, and you look above the pond, and I don't even know what kind of fish it was. But they make their nesting area by taking their tail and kind of swishing it around and making a little divot in a shallow pond. And there's so much competition, and the environment is so uniform that all their little divots from above look like it's perfectly tiled on the bottom, because all the divots are exactly the same size. And again, that would be more rare to have that. The most common one is clumped. So on your notes, patterns of distribution, they are dependent on resource availability and competition. Resource availability and competition. And I gave you clumped, random, and uniform, and clumped is the most common. Clumped is the most common. Okay, and this is one that changes during its lifetime. These shrubs tend to be clumped when they're young, probably where the seeds come out, right? And then medium shrubs are random, and then by the time they're mature, it's very uniform. So again, changes throughout its lifetime. And then other things can affect it. Territoriality. If there's somebody who's controlling a territory, then you can't be in that area. And things like seed dispersal and what's in the environment in order to get from one area to another. I'm going to revisit. There's one picture I'm missing. I don't know what it is. Okay, so I think that's it on that. And you have a question. Again, I don't know what this question is because I couldn't see it. 3 questions.
Cities are they make their own. What is this? Wow.
And I forgot to pause you. Sorry. So sorry. Pause you now. Okay, so go through your answers. See if you got it. Oh my gosh. Okay, so those are all biotic factors. Good job. People do tend to be clumped. Where are we clumped at? Around what? Cities. And around either coast. Exactly. Okay, good. Well, some of you got that. Go over your answers with your bio buddy, see if they're okay. All right. So, wherever you go, this baby follows you. So we're going to move in. This is the meat of this chapter, and this is when we move into the math of this chapter as well. On population growth, growth rate per capita rate of increase is the birth rate minus the death rate over the total population size. And that's what you need to put in your notes. Birth rate minus the death rate over the total population size. Okay, and there is a link here, and it's kind of interesting. It talks about population growth rate and which ones you can change it. I think I gave you a link to it in your notes. Did I? Somewhere I did. You'll run across it. But you can do population growth rate. You can look at death rate and rank countries. So South Africa is deaths per thousand, 17.49 per thousand. So if you needed to calculate the death rate for a population ecology question, okay, you would take how many, right? So you tend to have 17 deaths per 1,000 people. You would divide that out, and that would give you the death rate. And you're like, that's really nice. Thank you for sharing that. And then same thing if we wanted to do it based on the birth rate. Okay, so 46 births per 1,000 people. Is there anything else you, oh, obesity, let's try this. Where do you think it's the highest? Americans most. So, yeah, so I have a link somewhere in your notes, you're going to run across it, but anyway. Oh, and they already gave you the percent, so that is not 74 deaths, I misspoke earlier, so that is 74%. It's not individuals, but a percentage. All right. Now, when you talk about biotic potential, this is R, which is what you just calculated here, right? Birth rate minus death rate over the total population size is R. When you talk about R, your maximum is going to vary your R max is going to vary per organism. Do you see the baby hanging onto the mama's back? Yeah. Here's the baby right here, hanging onto the mom. It varies per organism. It's the maximum, if you say R max is the maximum rate of reproduction, the highest rate of increase. And it's going to be a factor of what's called your biotic potential. Those are dolls, okay? So your biotic potential depends on 4 things. Age of first reproduction. When do you start reproducing? And then your average number of offspring per reproduction. How often each individual reproduces. And then chance of survival until age of reproduction. That is your biotic potential. Did you fill in your notes? It's A, B, C, D. All right, and then when you look at this biotic potential, this first one, chance of survival until age of reproduction, then we want to start looking at survivorship curves. What are the likelihood that your offspring are going to make it? So to do that, you analyze cohorts. So cohorts are all the members of a population born at the same time. For instance, you're in a cohort of 10th graders. You're competing with other 10th graders. What are the chances that you're going to survive until at the point when you wanted to purposely reproduce? And you look at survivorship, the probability of a newborn individuals of a cohort surviving to particular ages. So on your notes, all of the members of a population born at the same time. So there are 3 curves. And again, these are idealized curves. These are not like, they'll be sometimes between 1 and 2 or 2 and 3. So if you're a type 1 curve, which we are, then most of 1,000 births, you always start at 1,000. Of 1,000, most survive the process of birth and they die when they are what? Older. Right? The other extreme would be type 3, which is most offspring die. So it could be oysters. When the baby oysters are released, right, they have to find something to attach onto. So if they miss that with the current, that's it, right? Seed has to find good what? Soil. So if it doesn't find it, then it's dead. Okay, so that would be type 3. And then type 2 falls in the middle. These are usually prey. You know, some predators eating them, and they don't care if they're eating them young, eating them old. They get picked off at any time. So on your survivorship curves, type 1, most individuals live out their lifespan and die of old age, like large mammals and humans. Large mammals and humans. Type 2, individuals die at a constant rate across their lifespan. Usually they are prey like birds and rodents. And type 3, most individuals die early in life, like fish, invertebrates, and plants. Fish, invertebrates, and plants. Okay, and this brings you to age structure diagrams. So there are 3 ages that you see in there, and I want you to talk about why this is pre-reproductive, reproductive, and post-reproductive. This is an increasing population, a stable population, and decreasing population. Support, why did they say, and person with the darkest shirt, why don't you go first? Support, why did they say this is an increasing population? Why is this stable? Why is this decreasing? Go ahead. Okay, now, I'm not sure where you are in your brain, okay? I know you're still getting used to coming back to school after 10 days of no school. But pre-reproductive, where are you going to go next? If you're pre-reproductive, what's the next thing you're going to move into? Reproductive. So if you look at this one with increasing population, it's pre-reproductive age is what? They have a lot of them. So all of those are going to move into the reproductive. And when they do that and start making more babies, you have a larger number than are what currently in reproductive. So then they're going to create even more babies and create even more babies and create even more. So this population is going to go up. Stable, you have about as many entering reproduction as leaving it. And then a decreasing population when you have fewer offspring coming in. And so your population size should go down. So on your age structure diagrams, the only thing you need there is the 3 groups: pre-reproductive, reproductive, and post-reproductive. And could I have the light shirted bio buddy? Could you take on 4C, please, on your notes? Go ahead, 4C. Okay, check with your bio buddy and see if they did okay. Did they get C? Because somebody didn't. Look at your bio buddy there. And I'm a highlighter. Okay, good. Most of you got that. Very good. Okay, yay. All right, let's talk about this. Semelparous versus Iteroparous. Next thing there on your notes. Semelparity, members of a population have only a single reproductive event in their lifetime. So it's all about that one act of reproduction. Single reproductive event in their lifetime. Mature adults will cease growth and focus on a reproductive event and then die. Dark shirted bio buddy, tell them what that's an adaptation for. Go ahead. Is that early?
No, I think it's for.
It's oh, is it
The C is just my.
Oh, yeah, it probably is. All right, we'll pick up right here. Slide 28. What do you need to do between now and the next time I see you? Review. What else? Terms. What else? RSVP for Sunday, the review. Okay.
Wait, why are we 10? We're not starting.